Danny saw three bad men with knives hurting a young soldier in his store. He could hide or help. Danny chose to fight. The men stabbed him 7 times, but he saved the soldier's life. The next morning, 100 Marines came to his house to say thank you. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching, also like and subscribe for more stories. Danny Rodriguez wiped the sweat from his forehead as he stocked the last shelf at Murphy's Corner store. It was 11:30 p.m. on a cold November night, and the small neighborhood market was finally quiet after a busy day. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows between the aisles of chips and canned goods. His 7-year-old son Lucas was asleep at home with Mrs. Garcia, their 70-year-old neighbor who watched him during Danny's night shifts. Being a single father wasn't easy, especially in this part of town where crime was rising and good jobs were disappearing. Danny's wife Maria had died 3 years ago from breast cancer, leaving him to raise Lucas alone. The memory of her last days still haunted him, the way she made him promise to be strong for Lucas, to give their son the life they had dreamed of together. The night shift at Murphy's paid $12 an hour, $2 more than day work, but it meant he slept while Lucas was at school and barely saw his son except on weekends and the brief hour before bedtime. Danny had dreams once, big dreams that felt like a lifetime ago. He wanted to join the Marines like his older brother Carlos, to serve his country and see the world. He had the recruitment papers filled out, was scheduled to ship out to Paris Island for boot camp, but then Maria got pregnant. Danny chose family over service without hesitation, tearing up those papers and getting a job at the local auto shop instead. He never regretted that choice, especially after Carlos died in an IED explosion in Afghanistan when Lucas was just 2 years old. Some sacrifices were worth making even when they broke your heart. The store owner, Mr. Murphy, was a decent man who understood Danny's situation. He let Danny bring Lucas to work sometimes on school holidays, and he never docked Danny's pay when Lucas got sick and Danny had to leave early. But the job barely covered rent on their 1-bedroom apartment, Lucas's clothes that he outgrew every few months, and the medical bills that still arrived regularly from Maria's final hospital stay. Danny looked at the clock, 15 more minutes until closing. Then he could drive home to his small apartment, check on Lucas, and maybe catch a few hours of sleep before Lucas woke up for school. It wasn't much of a life, but it was theirs, and Danny was determined to make it work. The bell above the door chimed, and Danny looked up to see a young man stumble inside. The cold November wind followed him in, making the newspaper rack rattle. He was wearing a military uniform, Marine dress blues with sharp creases and polished buttons, but something was very wrong. The Marine was limping badly, favoring his left leg, and his face was pale and sweating despite the cold night air. His usually perfect uniform was torn at the shoulder, and Danny could see what looked like blood seeping through the fabric. "Hey, you okay, man?" Danny asked, immediately coming around the counter. His instincts as a father kicked in. This kid looked barely older than some of the teenagers who hung around the neighborhood. The Marine, he couldn't have been more than 22, with close-cropped brown hair and scared blue eyes, leaned heavily against the snack aisle, sending bags of chips rustling. "I'm fine. Just need some water and maybe a bandage." But Danny could see he wasn't fine at all. The young Marine's hands were shaking, and there was definitely blood on his sleeve and shirt collar. His breathing was shallow and quick, like he was fighting panic. "Dude, you're hurt bad. What happened to you?" "Got jumped about 4 blocks over, near the old factory. 3 guys with knives." The Marine tried to smile, but it came out as more of a grimace. "They took my wallet, my phone, everything. But I got away before they could do worse." Danny felt his protective instincts flare. This was someone's son, someone's brother, probably not much older than Carlos had been when he enlisted. "We need to call the police right now. And get you to a hospital." "No hospitals, please." The Marine's voice cracked slightly. "Can't afford it. VA benefits are complicated, and I don't have the paperwork with me. Just need to clean up these cuts and get home." Danny understood that desperation, that choice between getting help and being able to pay rent. He'd been there himself too many times. "At least let me help you clean those wounds. I've got a pretty good first aid kit in the back room, learned basic medical stuff when my wife was sick." The Marine nodded gratefully, relief flooding his young face. "Thank you. I'm Jake Morrison, by the way. Danny Rodriguez. Come on, let's get you somewhere you can sit down and I can see how bad this really is." As Danny led Jake toward the back room, he noticed the medals and ribbons on the young Marine's chest. A purple heart with an oak leaf cluster, meaning he'd been wounded in combat more than once. A combat action ribbon. A good conduct medal. This kid had seen real war and survived it, only to come home and get mugged on a street corner by common criminals. It made Danny's blood boil with a righteous anger he hadn't felt since the day they told him Carlos wasn't coming home. In the back room, Danny helped Jake out of his dress blue jacket, revealing the full extent of the damage. There were knife cuts on his arms, a deeper gash on his shoulder, and bruising that suggested he'd been beaten as well as robbed. Danny worked carefully, cleaning the wounds with antiseptic and applying bandages while Jake gritted his teeth against the pain. "This happened after some kind of ceremony?" Danny asked, noticing how formal Jake's uniform was. "Memorial service for Marines killed in action. 23 names added to the wall today." Jake's voice was quiet, respectful. "I knew 3 of them personally. We served together in Helmand Province. I'm sorry for your loss." Danny meant it. He knew that pain, the hollow ache of losing brothers in arms. "Thank you." "Your brother, you said he was a Marine?" "Staff Sergeant Carlos Rodriguez. 2nd Battalion, 3rd Marines. Died in Afghanistan 5 years ago." Danny's hands never stopped moving as he worked on Jake's injuries. "IED got his convoy outside Marja." "I'm sorry. That's a hard way to lose family. Hardest part is my son never really got to know his uncle. Carlos was going to teach him baseball when he got home." They worked in comfortable silence for a few minutes, 2 men who understood loss in ways they wished they didn't. Danny was just finishing wrapping Jake's shoulder when they heard the bell chime again. But this time the voices that filled the store were loud, aggressive, and familiar. "We know you're in here, soldier boy. Should have stayed down when we told you the first time. Give us those fancy medals and maybe we won't cut you up too bad." Jake's face went white as paper. "They followed me. God, I'm so sorry, Danny. I didn't think they'd track me here. I thought I lost them." "It's okay. Get behind that desk and call 911. Now." Danny reached for the baseball bat he kept behind the register, Murphy's suggestion after a rash of robberies in the area. "I can't let them hurt you because of me. This is my fight. You're hurt and unarmed. I've got this." Danny gripped the bat tighter, feeling the familiar weight. He played baseball in high school before life got complicated. "Stay down and make that call." Danny walked to the front of the store, his heart pounding but his resolve solid. 3 men stood by the door, and they were exactly what he'd expected, street thugs looking for easy money. The leader had a scar running down his left cheek and wore gang colors that Danny recognized from the neighborhood. The second was thin with dead, soulless eyes and track marks on his arms. The third was the biggest, quiet but menacing with prison tattoos covering his forearms. "Store's closed," Danny said firmly, positioning himself between them and the back room. "Time for you to leave." Scarface laughed, a sound without humor. "Where's the Marine, old man? We got business with him." "Don't know what you're talking about. And I'm not old enough to be your father, so show some respect." "Respect." The thin one pulled out a switchblade, the metal glinting under the fluorescent lights. "You're about to learn some respect. That Marine has something that belongs to us," the big one said, speaking for the first time. His voice was deep and gravelly, like he'd been smoking for decades. "You mean the wallet you stole? Or his dignity?" Danny stepped forward slightly, showing he wasn't backing down. "Either way, you're not getting anything else from him tonight." The leader, Scarface, pulled out a long knife with a serrated edge. "Last chance, shop boy. Tell us where he is, or we start cutting pieces off you until you change your mind." Danny could hear Jake on the phone in the back room, whispering urgently to 911 dispatch. Help was coming but not fast enough. These men weren't leaving without violence. Danny could see it in their eyes, the way they moved like predators circling prey. "He's not here," Danny said firmly, raising the bat to a ready position. "But even if he was, you'd have to go through me first. And I'm not moving." Scarface grinned, showing yellowed teeth. "That can definitely be arranged, hero." The attack came faster than Danny expected. Scarface feinted left, then lunged right, his knife slashing toward Danny's chest in a quick, practiced motion. Danny swung the bat hard, connecting with the man's wrist with a satisfying crack that sent the knife clattering across the linoleum floor. But the other 2 were already moving, spreading out to flank him. The thin one with dead eyes came from the left, his switchblade dancing in his hand like he knew how to use it. The big one moved to the right, pulling out a hunting knife that looked like it could gut a deer. Danny was outnumbered and outgunned, but he thought about Jake bleeding in the back room, about Lucas sleeping safely at home, about Carlos who died serving strangers in a foreign country. "Stay back there, Jake." Danny yelled as he heard the Marine trying to help despite his injuries. Danny had never been in a real knife fight, but desperation and righteous anger made him fierce. He spun the bat like a staff, using both ends to block and strike. The thin man's blade caught his forearm, opening a shallow cut that burned like fire, but Danny kept fighting. He brought the bat around in a wide arc, catching the big man in the ribs and doubling him over. But Scarface had recovered his knife and was back in the fight. He came at Danny from behind while Danny was dealing with the other two, driving his blade deep into Danny's left side, just below the ribs. The pain was immediate and shocking, like being hit with a red-hot poker. Danny gasped but managed to grab the man's wrist, stopping him from pulling the knife out and making the wound worse. "You picked the wrong night to be a hero." Danny growled through gritted teeth, headbutting Scarface hard enough to break his nose. Blood sprayed everywhere as the man stumbled backward, leaving his knife buried in Danny's side. The thin man saw his chance and moved in fast, his switchblade finding Danny's back, then his shoulder, then his right arm. Each cut felt like liquid fire, but Danny kept fighting. He thought about Maria in her hospital bed, making him promise to protect Lucas from the world's cruelty. He thought about Carlos in his dress uniform, proud to serve something bigger than himself. Jake appeared suddenly from the back room, despite his injuries and Danny's orders to stay hidden. "Get away from him," the young Marine shouted, tackling the thin man around the waist. They went down hard, Jake using his good arm to punch the attacker in the face with military precision. "Semper Fi, brother," Jake yelled, and for a moment Danny felt the presence of his brother Carlos, like the ghost of every Marine who ever stood their ground when others needed protecting. But the distraction cost Danny dearly. The big man recovered from the rib shot and drove his hunting knife into Danny's chest, missing his heart by maybe 2 inches. Then Scarface, blood streaming from his broken nose, stabbed Danny in the stomach with a backup knife he'd pulled from his boot. The pain was overwhelming now, white-hot agony that made it hard to breathe. Danny fell to his knees, blood pooling beneath him on the store's worn linoleum. But even as his strength faded, he kept the bat raised between the attackers and Jake. "You want him, you finish me first," Danny gasped. The big man raised his knife for a killing blow, but sirens were getting louder outside. The 3 attackers looked at each other, grabbed what cash they could from the register, and ran for the door, leaving both men bleeding on the floor. "Danny?" Jake crawled toward him, his own injuries forgotten. "Stay with me, brother. Help is coming." Danny's vision was getting fuzzy around the edges. 7 wounds, he counted dimly. 7 times they'd put steel in him and he was still breathing. Still protecting. Carlos would be proud. Danny woke up 4 days later in the intensive care unit, his body a roadmap of bandages, tubes, and monitoring wires. The beeping of machines filled the room like a mechanical heartbeat. His mouth felt like cotton, and every small movement sent waves of pain through his torso. 7 stab wounds, the doctors had told Jake. He'd lost nearly half his blood and had died twice on the operating table before they managed to stabilize him. The first face he saw when his vision cleared was Lucas, sleeping curled up in an uncomfortable hospital chair that someone had pulled close to the bed. His 7-year-old son looked so small and fragile in the harsh hospital lighting, his school clothes wrinkled from sleeping in them. Mrs. Garcia sat in another chair nearby, her weathered hands folded in her lap, her eyes red-rimmed from crying and sleepless nights. "Daddy?" Lucas stirred when Danny tried to speak, his voice barely a whisper through his damaged throat. "Hey there, buddy," Danny managed to croak, his throat raw from the breathing tube they'd removed that morning. "You scared me so bad, Daddy. The doctor said you might not wake up. They said you almost went to heaven like Mommy did." Tears started rolling down Lucas's cheeks, and Danny's heart broke seeing his son's pain. Danny reached out with his good arm, the left one was immobilized due to nerve damage from one of the stab wounds, and touched his son's face with trembling fingers. "I'm here, Lucas. I'm not going anywhere. Daddy's too stubborn to give up that easy. Why did those bad men hurt you? What did you do wrong? How do you explain to a 7-year-old that sometimes good people get hurt protecting others? That the world can be cruel and senseless, but that doesn't mean you stop trying to help?" "I wasn't in trouble, buddy. I was helping a friend who needed me. Sometimes helping people means taking risks. Like how Mommy helped sick people at the hospital even when she got sick too?" Danny's chest tightened with emotion that had nothing to do with his wounds. Lucas was so much like Maria, seeing the good in everything, finding meaning in suffering. "Yeah, buddy. Exactly like Mommy." Mrs. Garcia leaned forward, her voice gentle but tired. "Danny, there are people here to see you. Marines. They've been waiting outside since yesterday taking shifts. The nurses finally said one could come in for a few minutes." "Marines? Why would Marines want to see me?" The door opened quietly and Jake walked in, his arm still in a sling but otherwise looking much better than the last time Danny had seen him. Behind him was an older man in marine dress blues with more ribbons and medals than Danny could count. The man's bearing screamed authority and respect. This was someone important. "Danny Rodriguez," the older Marine said, his voice carrying the weight of command. "I'm Colonel James Patterson. This young Marine tells me you saved his life." Danny tried to sit up but winced in pain. "I just did what anyone would do, sir." "No," Jake said firmly, pulling a chair close to Danny's bed. "You did what a Marine would do. What my brothers in Afghanistan would do. You took 7 knife wounds protecting someone you'd never met before." Colonel Patterson stepped closer, his expression serious but warm. "Mr. Rodriguez, Jake Morrison is one of our finest. He served 3 tours in Helmand Province before taking shrapnel that ended his active duty career. He was on his way home from a memorial ceremony honoring fallen Marines when he was attacked. He's a good kid. I couldn't just let them hurt him more than they already had." "But you're not a Marine, Mr. Rodriguez. You had no training, no obligation, no reason to risk your life for a stranger." The colonel's voice carried deep emotion. "And yet you fought 3 armed men and nearly died protecting one of our own." Jake leaned forward. "I told him about your brother Carlos. About how you wanted to serve but chose family instead. About how you worked nights to provide for Lucas." Colonel Patterson nodded slowly. "Staff Sergeant Carlos Rodriguez, 2nd Battalion, 3rd Marines. I knew your brother Danny. I was his commanding officer when he was killed. He was one hell of a Marine and he talked about you constantly. Said you were the bravest man he knew because you sacrificed your dreams so he could follow his." Danny felt tears forming in his eyes. Carlos had talked about him? Had been proud of him? "Carlos always said I took the easy way out by staying home." "No," the colonel said firmly. "Carlos told me you took the harder way. Anyone can be brave for a few minutes in combat. It takes real courage to be brave every day, to sacrifice your dreams for your family, to work jobs you don't love so your child can have a better life. He was proud of you, Danny. And after what you did for Jake, I understand why." Over the next week, as Danny slowly recovered, Jake visited every single day. Sometimes he came during visiting hours with flowers or magazines. Other times he just sat quietly while Danny slept, keeping watch like a sentinel. They talked about everything: Carlos and the stories he used to tell about their childhood, Maria and how much Danny missed her laugh, Lucas and his dreams of becoming a teacher like his mother wanted to be. "I don't have much family left," Jake admitted one afternoon, staring out the hospital window at the gray November sky. "Parents died in a car crash when I was 18, just a few months before I shipped out to boot camp. Little brother Tommy was in the car too. He was only 14. I'm sorry, Jake. That's a lot of loss for someone so young. The Corps became my family after that. My brothers in arms, you know? But now I'm out, medically retired, and most of my unit is still deployed or scattered across the country. It's hard to figure out where I belong." Danny understood that feeling of being lost, of having your identity tied to something that was suddenly gone. "What will you do now? With your life, I mean." "Don't really know. The VA is helping with college, but the paperwork is slow and complicated. I'm staying in a halfway house downtown with other vets, trying to figure things out one day at a time. Some days are better than others." "You're welcome in our home anytime, Jake. Lucas already asks about you every day. And honestly, I could use the help when I get out of here. The doctors say I'll need physical therapy for months." Jake looked at him with surprise and gratitude. "You mean that? You'd really want me around?" "Jake, you're family now. You bled with me, fought beside me. In my book, that makes you as much my brother as Carlos ever was. Carlos would have liked me? Carlos would have loved you. He always said the best Marines were the ones who understood that the real battle started when you came home, figuring out how to be a good man in a world that doesn't always reward goodness." That afternoon, Colonel Patterson returned with another visitor, a woman in a crisp business suit with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a professional bun. "Danny, this is Sarah Chin from the Marine Corps Foundation," the colonel said. "She has something important to discuss with you." Sarah pulled up a chair and opened a folder filled with papers. "Mr. Rodriguez, your story has spread throughout the entire Marine community. When word got out that a civilian took 7 stab wounds protecting one of our wounded warriors, Marines from bases all over the country wanted to help." "That's not necessary, ma'am. I didn't do it for recognition." "We know you didn't. That's exactly why we want to help." Sarah smiled warmly. "We've established an emergency fund in your honor. Marines from Camp Pendleton to Quantico have contributed. We want to help your family, pay your medical bills, maybe help you start a business or go to school, whatever you need to build the life you and Lucas deserve." Danny felt overwhelmed. "I don't know what to say. That's incredibly generous, but I can't accept charity. It's not charity, Colonel Patterson said firmly. It's family taking care of family. Because that's what you are now, Danny, you're part of the Marine family. You've earned that honor with your blood. Jake leaned forward. Danny, these people want to help because you did something extraordinary. You risked everything for a stranger, and that stranger happened to be someone they care about. Let them show their gratitude. Think about Lucas, Sarah added gently. Think about the opportunities this could give him. The education, the stability, the chance to pursue his dreams without worrying about money. Danny looked at his son, who was coloring quietly in his hospital bed, drawing pictures of stick figures he labeled Daddy, Jake, and Uncle Carlos. Lucas deserved so much more than Danny could give him on a grocery store clerk's salary. Maybe it was time to swallow his pride and accept help for Lucas's sake. What exactly are you offering? Danny asked quietly. From the Marine Corps Foundation, the colonel said. She has something to discuss with you. Sarah pulled up a chair. Mr. Rodriguez, your story has spread throughout the Marine community. When Marines heard that a civilian took 7 stab wounds protecting one of our wounded warriors, well, they wanted to do something. That's not necessary. Please let me finish. We've established a fund in your honor. Marines from all over the country have contributed. We want to help your family, pay your medical bills, maybe help you start a business or go to school. Danny was overwhelmed. I don't know what to say. Say you'll accept help from your extended family, Colonel Patterson said. Because that's what you are now, family. 2 weeks later, Danny was finally well enough to go home. Jake pushed his wheelchair to the hospital entrance while Lucas ran ahead, excited to have his father back. Ready for this? Jake asked as they approached the apartment building. More than ready. But as they turned the corner onto Danny Street, he stopped in shock. The entire block was lined with people. Men and women in military uniforms. Some active duty, some veterans, some in wheelchairs, some missing limbs. All standing at attention. What is this? Danny whispered. Jake smiled. Your honor guard. As Danny's wheelchair approached, a voice called out, Honor guard attention. 100 Marines snapped to attention in perfect unison. The sight was so powerful that Danny started crying. Lucas grabbed his father's hand, awed by the display. Colonel Patterson stepped forward. Danny Rodriguez, these Marines have come from bases across the country to honor you. They represent every Marine who couldn't be here today, and every Marine who wishes they could thank you personally. A young female Marine stepped out of formation and approached Danny's wheelchair. Sir, I'm Corporal Martinez. I served with your brother Carlos in Afghanistan. He talked about you all the time. Said you were his hero. She pinned something to Danny's shirt, a medal. This is an honorary Marine Corps medal. It's not official because you're not a Marine. But every person here believes you've earned the right to wear it. Danny looked down at the medal through his tears. I can't accept this. Yes, sir, you can, another Marine called out. You bled for one of us. That makes you one of us. The formation began moving, each Marine stopping to shake Danny's hand or salute him. Some shared stories about Carlos. Others talked about Jake and how much his survival meant to them. A few were too emotional to speak, just touching Danny's shoulder or nodding with respect. An older Marine in a wheelchair approached. I'm Sergeant Major Williams. Lost my legs in Iraq. Been fighting to feel like I matter again. What you did reminds me that civilians and Marines are all Americans, all family. A young Marine with one arm stepped forward. You gave Jake his life back. That means you gave all of us hope that people still care about Marines when we come home. As the formal ceremony ended, the Marines didn't leave. They followed Danny, Jake, and Lucas to the apartment, where Mrs. Garcia had prepared food for an army. Literally. Danny's small apartment filled with Marines sharing stories, playing with Lucas, and treating the Rodriguez family like long-lost relatives. Jake fit seamlessly into the group, finally looking like he belonged somewhere again. Colonel Patterson pulled Danny aside. There's something else. The foundation has purchased a house for your family. 3 bedrooms, backyard for Lucas, garage where you can work on cars if you want. Colonel, I can't. You can and you will. The house is in Jake's name too. We're hoping he'll stay and help you raise that boy. Lucas needs male role models and Jake needs a family. Danny looked across the room where Jake was showing Lucas how to fold a flag properly. Other Marines were teaching his son military time and how to stand at attention. Lucas was eating up the attention, grinning from ear to ear. What about work? I'll lose my job at the store because of the injuries. The foundation is funding a scholarship for you to study business. We want you to open your own store, maybe hire some veterans who are struggling to find work. This is too much. Colonel Patterson smiled. Danny, you took 7 knives for 1 Marine. If we could give you 7 houses, we would. Let us help you the way you helped Jake. That evening, after the Marines had finally left, Danny sat on his couch with Lucas on one side and Jake on the other. His body still ached from the wounds, but his heart felt fuller than it had since Maria died. Daddy, Lucas said sleepily, are all those Marines our family now? I think so, buddy. Cool. I've never had such a big family. Jake smiled. Me neither. 6 months later, Danny stood in front of his new business Rodriguez and Morrison Market. Jake was his partner, and they employed 3 other veterans who had struggled to find work. The store specialized in military surplus and everyday groceries, becoming a gathering place for local veterans. Lucas thrived with Jake as his big brother. The young Marine helped with homework, taught him about honor and duty, and filled the void that Carlos's death had left in both their lives. Danny's wounds had healed, leaving scars that he wore with pride. He'd gained weight, started smiling again, and even began dating a teacher from Lucas's school who understood about loss and second chances. But the best part was watching Jake transform. The lost, hurt young Marine had become a confident businessman and surrogate uncle. He was studying business administration with GI Bill benefits and talking about expanding their store into other neighborhoods. You know what I love most about this? Jake said one evening as they closed the store together. What's that? Your brother Carlos saved my life in Afghanistan. Not directly, but his squad covered our retreat when we got ambushed. I never got to thank him. Jake looked at Danny. But maybe this is how I thank him. By taking care of his family. Danny felt the familiar tightness in his chest when people mentioned Carlos. He would have liked you. Would have been proud of how you've stepped up for Lucas. Carlos would have been proud of you too. The way you fought those men, the way you're building this business, the way you're raising that boy, that's Marine-level dedication. 1 year after the attack, the Marines organized another gathering. This time it wasn't just Marines, it was the entire community. The mayor gave Danny a key to the city. The police chief presented him with a Civilian Heroism Award. Local news stations covered the story of the single dad who took 7 stab wounds protecting a stranger. But Danny's favorite part was seeing Jake receive his own recognition. The young Marine had been selected for a leadership program that would help him open stores in other cities, employing more veterans and building stronger communities. I've got something for you, Jake said privately, handing Danny a framed photo. It was a picture of Carlos in Afghanistan standing with his squad. Jake was in the background, barely visible. I found this in my old gear. Thought you should have it. Danny stared at the photo, seeing his brother's familiar smile. He looks happy. He was. Always talking about home, about you and Maria and little Lucas. Said he couldn't wait to teach Lucas how to throw a football. Lucas would have loved that. Jake knelt down to Lucas's level. How about I teach you instead? I bet your Uncle Carlos would like that. Lucas nodded eagerly. Will you tell me stories about Uncle Carlos while we play? Every single one I remember. As the celebration continued around them, Danny felt a presence he hadn't felt in years. Carlos, watching over them, proud of the family they'd built from tragedy and courage. 2 years after the attack, Danny received a letter that changed everything. It was from the Secretary of Defense, informing him that he was being awarded the Civilian Medal of Valor for his actions that night. The ceremony was held at the Pentagon with Lucas and Jake by his side. Dozens of Marines who had visited that day in his apartment were there in uniform. Colonel Patterson, now promoted to general, presented the medal. This medal is given to civilians who risk their lives to save others, General Patterson said. But this one is special because it represents something bigger than one act of courage. It represents the bond between civilians and military, the idea that we're all Americans, all family. After the ceremony, Jake pulled Danny aside. I have news. The VA approved my request. Request for what? Jake smiled. To legally change my name. I want to be Jake Rodriguez Morrison. I want to be part of your family officially. Danny's eyes filled with tears. Carlos would have loved having another little brother. And Maria would have loved having another son to worry about. That evening in their hotel room, Lucas fell asleep between Danny and Jake while they watched TV. 2 years ago, Danny had been a lonely single father working night shifts and barely surviving. Now he had a partner, a brother, a thriving business, and a son who was growing up with the best male role model he could ask for. Do you ever regret it? Jake asked quietly. Getting stabbed 7 times for a stranger? Danny looked at his sleeping son, then at the young man who had become his brother. Never. Best decision I ever made. Even though you almost died? Jake, I was already dying. Slowly, from loneliness and worry and trying to do everything alone. That night, I started living again. Jake nodded. Me too. I was dying from the inside out, feeling useless and forgotten. You gave me purpose again. We gave each other purpose. Semper Fi, brother. Semper Fi. 5 years later, Rodriguez and Morrison Markets had expanded to 12 locations across 3 states, all employing military veterans and serving as community gathering places. Danny had remarried, the teacher from Lucas's school who had stolen his heart with her kindness and understanding. Lucas, now 12, was a confident young man who volunteered at the VA hospital and raised money for wounded warriors at his school. He wore a small Marine pin on his backpack, not because he wanted to be a Marine, but because he wanted to honor the family that had chosen him. Jake had become a regional director for a national program helping veterans start businesses. He'd married a nurse from the VA hospital and was expecting his first child, a daughter they planned to name Maria, after the woman who had taught Danny how to love unconditionally. But the most important change was harder to see. Danny had learned that heroism isn't about being fearless. It's about being so afraid you can barely breathe, but acting anyway because someone needs you. Lucas had learned that family isn't just about blood, it's about people who choose to stand by you no matter what. And Jake had learned that sometimes losing everything is just the beginning of finding what you really need. The scars on Danny's body had faded, but the scar on his heart, the one left by Maria's death and Carlos's sacrifice, had been transformed into something beautiful. It was still there, still tender sometimes, but now it was surrounded by so much love and purpose that it didn't hurt anymore. On quiet evenings when the stores were closed and the family was together, Danny would sometimes touch the Medal of Valor hanging in their living room. Not because he was proud of the recognition, but because it reminded him of the truth he'd learned that night in the store. Sometimes the greatest victories come from the moments when we choose to stand and fight, even when we're outnumbered, even when we're scared, even when we have everything to lose. Because that's when we discover who we really are and what we're really capable of. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, the people we save end up saving us right back. The willingness of America's veterans to sacrifice for our country has earned them our lasting gratitude. Jeff Miller.